Welcome to Municon 2021, everybody. Hello, my name is Laura Froelich, and I'm with Snohomish County Surface Water Management, and I will be moderating the session today, How to Include Ethnic Media in Outreach. And we're happy to have Mary Rabourn with King County Stormwater Services section giving this presentation. She also supports the King County Public Health COVID outreach with ethnic media. Just a few housekeeping. Please type your questions into the chat Q&A box, and we will plan to answer those questions following the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mary. Mary?
Thank you very much. And I do want to thank King County Public Health for pulling me in and giving me the opportunity to start this project up. It has been incredibly insightful into working with communities. So I'm happy to share this, what I've learned so far, some of our things, some of our tips, and happy to talk later too if anyone wants to contact me. So this first image is Sandra Makeda on M Radio interviewing Mariel Torres Medipor, one of our interview rock stars during COVID. And it's an example of connection, trust, access, community professionals, spokespeople, considering a glossary in language, really everything that makes a great interview, but also a great connection with community. And I want to say that ethnic and community media can and should include small English language papers that are in rural areas. But for this talk, I'll be focusing on ethnic media that is deeply embedded within communities of color. And ethnic media has been covered by other mainstream white media since the pre-2000s. The media, within the media community, they're very aware of ethnic media. But in March 2020, the death of ethnic media looked like a high possibility because advertisers were pulling out as Washington State moved to stay home, stay safe. Print jobs were in the shop, bills were waiting to be paid. It looked grim for ethnic media. We also had, on top of the COVID challenge, that the challenges of trying to reach people from our home as we're sitting behind a desktop, and especially the challenge of reaching those most at-risk populations, communities of color, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Pacific Islanders. Those were the folks that were having the highest infection rates and fatality rates as well. And, how are we going to do this outreach? Working from home, not even leaving your home, not relying on the usual places like libraries or coffee shops. And also while this racial reckoning was happening, and also while anti-Asian bias was happening. So Aminé has not really said why he left this billboard as he left Portland for LA. But I think that really he's talking about the lack of visibility of these communities and the infrastructures they've built to go about their lives within our systems. So just a quick background. The overall population, for example, in King County has increased since 1990, almost 50%, from 1.5 million residents to 2.26 million residents. The percentage of white residents in King County has been decreasing between that time as well. And nearly every minority category has seen gains, especially Asian and Hispanic Latinx populations. A steadily increasing proportion of King County residents are foreign-born. So in 2000, 15% of King County residents were foreign-born. As of 2018, and probably by now, almost a quarter are foreign-born. And 65% live in family households. So that tells you we have some big audiences that we could be reaching. And another point is these media have been around for a long time. There were historical papers in the 1880s that provided information to Chinese communities. But here is the facts, one of the early Black African-American media founded by the Beaver family. And Fitzgerald Beaver had created this paper in 1961. And a lot of these media are family-owned, multi-generational, and Their kids today are taking on the papers, and these media have been serving vibrant, unseen communities, unseen by us, communities, and have very strong information networks. Just to give you an idea, City of Seattle maintains the ethnic media list, and just Google City of Seattle ethnic media and you'll see a lot of information towards the bottom of the page. You can download the current ethnic media list. There are about 147 ethnic media outlets. Of those, 5 are Black African American. There are 6 East African, 6 Somali, which include Muslim populations. For the Asian Pacific Islander community, we have Filipino, 5 South Asian, Japanese papers, Korean, Pacific Islanders, Vietnamese, Chinese language has 10 media outlets. We have a Middle Eastern, and for the Spanish language, there are 20 media outlets. And then we have multi-language, multicultural populations, Polish, Russian. So you can see there are a lot of ways and professionals to work with to reach communities. So this is a slide. We had a recent African American Media Forum, and this slide is from Tony Benton of Rainier Valley Radio. And I think he's talking about Black media, but this really, I thought, captures the feel and the mission that a lot of ethnic media has, which is it was created for us, by us, and representing us. And we connect to our audience, and by utilizing Black or ethnic media, you build a stronger network and communication base, and these media shape our perceptions with the people who are different than us. In other words, they help interpret our information for their communities, but they also help interpret their communities for us. So the focus of the COVID outreach for public health was on earned media. And it was also on at-risk Hispanic, Latinx, African American, Asian Pacific Islander groups who are at high risk and not getting information. But also, it was a great way to focus on how can we continue this past COVID? How can we build ethnic media into a longer term relationship? So I just want to give you some common language that we use. Paid media. That, of course, is the media that you're going to buy. It can be video, ad spots, print advertising, online advertising, pay-per-click, social media, etc. And then earned media, which is what the goal of this project was, is to get that free media, to have the community talking about you or with you. And in this case, interviews, but it also hopefully sharing articles and posts, which is the owned media, the media that we are creating, our social media, our PDFs, our content and our content strategy. How are you going to get the information to a community and what kind? And some of the basics for any media program, and especially ethnic media, are spokespeople. And it's handy to have spokespeople that are trained in crisis communications in general with ethnic media. It's been a friendly audience. This is not a Fox News controversial gotcha kind of interview. They're really intent on sharing information their communities are not getting. And it's good to have those spokespeople, if possible, bilingual, if that's a need, and also trained in cultural issues, and to take the time to create a glossary. We tend to use our own jargon. That doesn't necessarily translate or interpret well with communities. And I say script, but really what I mean is a question and answer session. A lot of these ethnic media are very tiny operations. They do not have time to research our topics, and you are the subject matter expert. So it's handy to have a Q&A with suggested questions. Don't have to follow the script, but suggested questions on information you hope to get out, but also the answers. The answers can contain the websites and the phone numbers that you're trying to direct folks to. And it's very helpful when you're working with interpreters, because they can go back and see what you said, even if they missed it in the moment, and interpret the information. And it's just a guide. And then follow up. How are you going to work with and support ethnic media? How can you amplify their efforts? Share that interview on your channels, your social media, your web pages, because that in turn helps support ethnic media and the work they're doing. And it doesn't have to be fancy. Here's where the magic happens for our interviews. And for example, in the Spanish language, Latinx media, we were probably cranking out about 4 interviews a week minimum, including Saturday mornings. So it can be pretty intense, especially if you're trying to keep a fresh script for most interviews, and information was continually changing. So it's an intense piece when you're doing an event like COVID, but in general, it wouldn't be that much pressure. And also, by doing the interviews, you can build trust by not being an expert. And I know that makes a lot of folks uncomfortable. We're in the business of being experts, but you have information. And that information is valuable to a community. It's information a community needs, wants, or would be interested in if we could get that to them. And working with ethnic media is a great way to do that. And then again, it's how do we amplify and share what ethnic media is doing? If we raise their profile in their communities, it helps us as well. And I gotta say, it's easier to get earned media when you can say that an event that happened, we had a great example. We had an interview with Dr. Jeff Duchin about COVID on a small Converge Media, which is Black African-American media. And with the help of our promotion on the King County side and through our social media, they had over 1,000 folks listening to the live feed, and then many folks afterward listening to the recorded feed. So that's just a great example of how to work together and amplify getting that information out to communities. And I want to point out that ethnic media plays a big role in reaching communities. So this is, the Pew Internet does regular research, and it shows that there is a high trust for local news outlets. We know that's true even in rural papers. And who else is going to cover your high school sports? You know, who has your local obits? That's where people are looking for news. It's embedded in their area. And when we have large national outlets, that's great. But that doesn't give you the story of what's really happening in your area, or what your local county or city could be providing to you. So the other reason too, local news outlets are trusted, highly trusted, is because there are so few reporters of color covering mainstream stories that impact communities and that are culturally accurate and not racist or biased. And you can see that most people of color have a high trust too for their local news organizations. They know who they are, they can reach out to them. It's just a great way to build relationships. And then I want to point out that we are kind of missing the boat and a big opportunity in the environmental field. So again, Pew Internet, Yale, a lot of other folks are researching the impact of ethnic media. And here you can see there is a high environmental value within communities of color. And this is just one example. Who is the most alarmed or concerned about global warming? You can clearly see that Latinx, African-American, and you might as well just say other communities of color are very concerned about the impacts and coming impacts of global warming, whereas white populations tend to have more of a political piece to that. And also, white folks tend to underestimate how low income and people of color are concerned about global warming and or value the environment. So we've got to check ourselves. Is that an assumption that we're incorrectly carrying? Because what we really see is that our white populations are much more doubtful and dismissive about global warming because of political overtones. I want to emphasize here, where are we putting our money? Where are we putting our efforts to get folks engaged in those bigger issues of climate change? And we know that stormwater is a big part of climate change. And it's a big part of how we can address some of the outcomes from climate change. So if we take a look at this again, I just want to review here. Where are we putting our money and who is most concerned? So ethnic media lessons from the COVID response? That ethnic media are fantastic community navigators. They can help you figure out your cultural blind spots, and they are happy to work with you on that, more than happy. And ethnic media is a local business. They are a big piece of their local community. They're the ones who run, like I said, the ads for the obituaries and local business events and deals and highlight stories in their communities. And they're also deeply embedded in their community economy. When their businesses go down, they struggle as well. So our challenge, as local governments, as folks trying to get environmental behaviors and actions taken, how are we going to connect from our homes and our offices and our desktops? Does your strategy include ethnic media? And have you researched your audiences using social marketing practices? That, I think, is the most important and key piece about social marketing. These communities are out there. They have created their own information networks. If we are not tying into those information networks, we are not controlling our story and information in a way that perhaps would be more accurate or more accessible. And so there's a big role for ethnic media in the work that we do. They create and test our relevant information and can tell us if we're off target and not getting it right. They are trusted messengers for these communities and interpreters of our information, and they can help correct our biases and misunderstandings. And it represents a community investment when you buy advertising or support community media. And they're also your letter of introduction to communities. So ask yourself, why are you not working with community professionals to help you on these needs? So as Aminé's billboard may have said, we are here. So to understand and to be understood makes our happiness on earth. I think de Blasey said it perfectly. The community in community-based social marketing is ethnic media. They came from countries, other countries, or they saw a need for information for their communities. They had a background in journalism. They have a vital personal mission to get our information to their communities. They really do represent public participation and engagement, equity, and also communications. And most importantly, audience research for audiences that we're not familiar or comfortable with, that we have no idea really where they stand on some of our issues. It's a great place to start, a great partner on your projects. I think our goal should be really deep democracy and audiences that must be part of the decisions that impact them, and ethnic media can play a role in that. So thank you, and we're ready to start questions.
Thank you, Mary. So we definitely have time for some questions. I'm not seeing any in the chat here, but if you guys want to go ahead and type those in, or you're also welcome to turn your mute off and ask the question out loud. I know there's a question out there.
Or, you know, text me or email me offline, and I'm happy to answer questions as well. I can start with how intimidating it can be to do outreach to ethnic media. I would say you just jump in. You just jump right in there and contact. The list of ethnic media, of course, can be pretty daunting since there are 147 outlets. But so sometimes working with a small ethnic media contractor can be helpful, and there's a few of those folks. They're getting easier to find, and you don't have to have a big budget. In fact, you don't even have to have a budget. You can explain to media that you're happy to work with them, and you will help amplify their information and support them in other ways.
Okay, great. I'm seeing a question. What resources are available to connect with these local media resources besides a Google search?
So let me I'll put the link to Seattle's ethnic media program. It's in my notes, but it might be helpful. So, sorry, I can't think and talk at the same time. No, that's very challenging. So this link can take you to the list of all these media resources. And on that list, it will give you some background on the reach, the numbers of readers or viewers that they have in general, the languages that they may need. A lot of ethnic media can take your media releases or information in English, but it's good to think through, all right, if you're going to share this, say, with a Russian audience, Russian-speaking audience, how will they get information, further information or help in Russian? Will you be hiring an interpreter to answer your phone? Will you put out a PDF in Russian? You know, it's kind of thinking through your strategy when you're doing this information outreach. And then sometimes too, I'm happy to partner as well, because if we partner and spend a little bit more with ethnic media, we can get a better placement for either an advertisement or social media or an interview. And I'm also hosting and planning forums that focus on specific ethnic media, so folks can become more familiar too. And we have another question.
Yeah, we have another question. In your last presentation, you discussed an ethnic media champion. Can you talk about creating an ethnic media champion within our organization?
Well, I can say it can be challenging. I think that must be why champions have to work so hard. Anyway, so actually several years ago, I got a small grant and worked with a great partner at Public Health, Meredith Lee Volmer, who does comic books, which would be a whole other talk. And we did a kind of open invitation to ethnic media to meet and greet and meet project managers, and they were super excited by it. And the energy was fantastic. And so I thought, wow, this is great. Now King County as a whole will adopt and integrate ethnic media into their regular media outreach. That didn't happen. And in fact, it took COVID to point out our deficiencies in our media outreach, because we've got the mainstream media machine down, but ethnic media, we did not have an active program. And so that is yet another one of the hidden opportunities of COVID, is that it pointed out our deficiencies in reaching communities. And because of that, this particular opportunity, based on that earlier grant, is how I got pulled in to help public health, because they were strapped for staff, people were dying, it was critical to get this information out, and it was like, none of us have time to do this, let's pull her in, she did this before, and I had been complaining for years. So those of you who know me, I apologize, because I do get on my soapbox on things, and that is a challenge. The challenge is getting these voices heard, and that's reflected in getting those voices heard within your organization. But I think with COVID and this example, that champion could be one of your community engagement folks, one of your project designer folks. It could be from a project strategy that you do and you show that success. And it could be someone from your communications or media teams that see what you're up to and would like to be more engaged.
Thank you. Looks like another question. Have you tried using churches or other ethnic community organizations to get out messaging? If so, could you elaborate on your experience?
Yes. Okay. I want to, that's a great question. And I forgot to mention this. So often project managers who are really, they're told, hey, you got to do outreach to people that speak Spanish. And they're a little bit freaked out because they go, oh my gosh, I don't even know if there are Spanish speakers in my neighborhood, and often turn to churches or community-based organizations. That's a great alternative. But again, often the same community-based organization is the one that everyone goes to. So they tend to get overwhelmed And also project managers tend to say, I want you to focus on my particular project, you know, for the greater glory of whatever program or division I'm in. And to the community, that just doesn't make sense. It's like, no, you're government. They see the city, the county, it's like, what, I can't figure out which of your divisions and units you are. Why is this important to you? What is important to us is different, us, the community. And so working with community-based organizations is a great way to go. But again, it's fantastic if you bring money, and because you're asking people to add to a mission. Your mission may be their mission, but have you spent the time to find out that you have a joint shared value, say, in protecting the health of children because of contaminated water from stormwater in a swimming area? That's great, but community-based organizations are focused on their mission, whereas ethnic media is focused on the mission of getting your information into the hands of the community that needs it in a form that they can use. And churches are great too. They've been great partners. During COVID, what public health has stood up is pretty impressive. They have community navigator groups that are kind of the liaisons or messengers between public health and a lot of community-based organizations and communities. They've had religious and church outreach, a whole separate group as well, working with getting out information and addressing misinformation that might be related to different faith-based organizations. And then we have ethnic media, we have elected official outreach, et cetera. So each of these is a strategy that you would use for your project. And it's good to consider what you bring to the table to get that information and service into the hands of the community, and how you're going to support that group. And when you when you use ethnic media, again, you're working with professionals in communications for their community. They will help you navigate those issues. Whereas community-based organizations may or may not have that capacity, and they also may not have the reach that their media does. So again, something to consider.
Thank you. So it looks like we have time for one more question if there is one. But if not, Mary, thank you so much for addressing this important topic with us today. And if anyone does have questions or would like to contact Mary, please reach out to her directly. Her contact information is in our program. And yeah, thank you again, Mary, and thank you everyone for attending today.
Thank you very much. And it would be super fun to continue this program and figure out how we can embed it in all of our organizations.
And stay tuned. Mary has another presentation later today, so come back and see her.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end this meeting now.
Thank you.